Uh, So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jill Clifford, president here at Freight Plus. Freight Plus is a managed transportation service. I'm joined today by Steve Aborn, CEO of Freight Plus, and we're super excited to be here. Steve, you want to say a quick hello?
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here.
Great. So if you have any questions, please just pop them in the chat, and we promise we'll get to them. Our discussion for today is centered on enhancing financial and operational visibility in logistics. The goal of supply chain or operations is to create a fully digital mirror of the transportation process. It's important to consider integrations, technology, resourcing, and BI capabilities when thinking about buying and implementing a TMS. A TMS is not enough. A TMS is really just a piece of a very large puzzle. And so you also, in addition to thinking about considering integrations and technology resourcing and BI capabilities, it's also, you're going to need to think about how to manually manage distinct processes to ensure that TMS is accurate. There are a lot of software providers out there in 2024, and they're claiming to be, the magic bullet. But in our experience, they only get you so far. The goal for companies should be to manage in the direction of actionable, accurate, and data. Super, super important, really hard to do. And logistics software, only gets you so far. And so we thought it would be a great topic to discuss today. And so with that, let's dive in. Today, so Steve, what are the best companies trying to do as it relates to operational, financial, data visibility in the transportation process?
Yeah, I think I think we've really we've been doing this for about 8 years, and in a consulting fashion for about 30 years, and I think the conversation the last 2-3 years has really changed. As part of our sales process, one of the things that we're doing is kind of documenting, what are people reacting to? What are they talking about? What are they engaging with? What are they asking follow-up questions about? And I think, about 80% of the prospect conversations that we're having at this point are on some level tied back to visibility. That's kind of the broad theme is folks are looking for more visibility, right? And some of that is, operational processes and some of that's also financial information, right? So some of it's literally tracking the truck, and then some of it is trying to tie together, all the things that have to happen through the transport cycle into a story that they can report on. And so, some of the questions I think folks are really starting to engage with is like, how much does it cost to ship my goods? How is that, how does that change over time? Teams, especially financial teams, are spending a lot of time on GL coding. I mean, whether it's consultants or more recently as in the managed service world, like we spend a lot of time at different facilities. I think, I think one thing we've seen over the last 8 years is there's people in these warehouses and, they have a stack of paper this high and they have their pen and they're, they're categorizing all this information that is kind of dropped. And they're sending it to a central office, and then some finance person is keying that into its system so that they can get better financial information. So I think on the finance side, it's like how can we automate and bring visibility to these processes and add a level of precision to them, right? I think everyone in 2024 kind of understands that pen and paper is a scrappy good way to get it done, but there's better ways to solve these problems. On the operations side, I think, any operations team is going to have an eye towards continuous improvement. And I think continuous improvement, like data and actionable data is really kind of at the heart of any good, solid, continuous improvement process, right? So first we need to define the process, we need to measure the process, and then we use that data so that we can all align on what the outcomes are, jump in a room or jump on a Zoom call and start to come up with the solution, right? So I think, operations teams having like actionable, accurate data that they're confident in that really goes, throughout the full cycle is critically important. We talked to a prospect last year. It's a Fortune 75 company. It's a huge operation, kind of a little bit out of who we typically deal with, but one of the larger organizations in the world. And that, in this case, they wanted visibility, meaning tracking information. And really what they were trying to do was leverage the enormous amount of freight. They didn't have good visibility to it. They couldn't track it effectively, right? The teams didn't put a lot of faith into the messages that they were getting. And so they were looking for better solutions in terms of tracking their freight so that they could align S&OP processes, right? So for them, it's about, more throughput at the warehouses, about less labor sitting around. It's about, marrying, again, kind of the theme here is marrying actionable data to, core processes within their organization. I think another thing is like the sales and customer service. One thing that we hear people talk more and more about is like managing their customers, right? So customer service teams, and again, we've talked to some of the largest companies in the world, and they've really struggled to get actionable tracking information into their customer service team's hands, right? And so what does that mean? That means oftentimes their customers are the ones that are alerting that, hey, where's the freight? Where's the freight? Where's the freight? And so, I think the ability to go from reactive to proactive in terms of how you're dealing with your customers is critically important. And that's being able to measure that and have a source of truth on that is critically important. For me, like my background before this was Amazon on the retail side, and part of who and how we decided to buy from people was how reliable were they, as a vendor, right? Like how consistent were their transit times? Did they fill all of their orders? Were those on time? Because all of that, again, is causing increased cost for your business partner. So I think, you're not able to solve those problems if you're not able to measure them. So it's really about, starting the process, tracking the process, measuring the process, and then, applying some continuous improvement to those processes. And, I think what you're going to drive towards is it's going to make you a better partner for your suppliers, better partner for your customers. It's a more profitable organization and a more actionable organization. So just kind of high level, I think what we're seeing more and more in 2024.
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely more around the visibility than it is just around what are the market conditions, what's driving freight cost, and where are the good service providers. It's really about these shippers being able to manage, run, and grow their business, and getting that data visibility at the order level, really across all departments. And I think if you are looking to start with a good transportation process, you're going to get a piece of that. And so, I think I heard you say it more than once, like it is hard, right? And just having a TMS isn't going to solve the visibility, the holes, right? And so, what it is, so if we set the stage, like what do companies need to have a handle on as they start through thinking about the right data visibility across finance, operations, customer service, sales, procurement, shipping teams?
Yeah, I think you need a good handle. Really, it starts with process, I would say. I think we've seen, just again, kind of going back to the consulting space, we've seen a number of different companies that have tried to jump into the deep end of the pool with, TMS and technology, and they didn't really have a good, solidly defined process, right? There weren't requirements that they were trying to solve as they went out and evaluated, and then more importantly, implemented software, right? So I think, kind of starting with a good process for this order management cycle and this transportation order management cycle is critically important. And I think there's a lot of work there, right? It starts with order information. So, not just your customer or the order you place with your supplier, but in this case, like when freight is ready to ship. So that's really when we're kind of starting this. Good process and technology around optimization and load building, around scheduling, being able to store and have access to your contracts, right? And in this case, we're really talking about, contracts in terms of like what are, some of the stuff's goofy. It's payment terms, it's liability, it's, process for payment, right? But that if you can't access that when something goes wrong, like that's a big problem, right? And then another part of that is like, what do you do when something changes? There's so many trucking companies in the space, and a lot of them are coming in and out of authority. Do you have a good process for managing that? Do you have it? Is it reportable? Is it actionable? I think continue to go like rating and tendering. Something that I thought would be incredibly easy, and is measuring tender accepts and rejects, right? And I think part of what you're starting to get into is the complexity around the trucking supply base, right? I think what we've seen is not all carriers act alike. Not all carriers will engage with your technology, and that has downstream impacts to your performance and your reporting, right? If you want to use a carrier, and the easy thing to do is to say to throw them out, but what if they offer a unique service for a unique a unique location or customer type, or it's customer routed, right? Your customer says you have to use them. These are all things that if you're driving towards like actionable, accurate data, you have to really consider. A big one in 2024 has been like risk management. So I think previously we talked about risk management at kind of the global contract level, but do you have capabilities, and are you capturing that information at the dock level as freight is onboarded on trucks, right? I mean, theft and fraud and all of the different combinations of ways that people are trying to steal freight essentially, or steal revenue from moving trucks. It's gotten incredibly complex. There's a lot going on. So the ability to understand what your process is, to report on that process, and then when something does go wrong, have documentation that you can provide to the potentially the insurance risk provider and say, hey, here's our process, here's what we did, we checked all these boxes, and here's what happened. That's pretty powerful stuff for the tough situation that you potentially find yourself in, right? Yeah. I think the last one is, and this is obviously a big part of this webinar, but track and trace. We work with a lot of software providers that are Gartner, Magic Quadrant providers, basically in the TMS and in the visibility space, right? And I think providing visibility to shipments in transit is incredibly hard. And I think one of the things that we've found is to give you an idea of the level of complexity is, as you approach a supplier, trucking base, they potentially have certain providers, software providers that they will work with, providers that they won't work with. They work with those providers in different ways, right? Which is sending, different data signals to your technology, to your reporting. And if you think about that, so potentially we have 3 different providers, and we have 10 different companies each using each of those 3 different providers, and they each use it in a different way. And then, oh, by the way, at some point that technology is going to break. An order information, an order ID, a driver's license, like something is going to get chopped, and it's not going to go. So I think to kind of take it back to your original point, it's people, it's process, and technology, because you need to have somebody auditing that technology. They need to be able to figure out what is a signal that I need to go action it. And then they need to be consistent in their process of actioning it, because you will have, you will have those manual intervention opportunities. And when folks jump in and they're not consistently entering the information in the right way, what's going to happen is again, you're going to have messy data that people don't buy into. So I think, to kind of sum it up, it's really looking holistically at this process and trying to figure out where can I solve this with technology, what happens when it breaks, and making sure the team is really trained up and consistent in the way that they're actioning information and entering information, so that you have that, really clear data set that your teams can use throughout the organization.
Yeah, and it's that consistency along with being very, very persistent. I think what I heard you say too is, again, it's the technology. There's a platform to get data visualization. There's lots of technologies and lots of products, but then really having a deep dive at every one of those steps, a real deep dive on what is the technology going to do, what happens when it breaks, and even still when the technology works, there's some deep process with some manual intervention to make sure, not just auditing those practices, but even in operationalizing those practices, the technology and the software products aren't going to do it all. They're just not. So again, I think this emphasis, get a handle on kind of all of those steps in that order management cycle from a transportation perspective. And then at each step, really understanding, okay, what is the process? What are the steps? How am I supporting this with technology? And then how am I supporting this with people?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And I think, the more, if you're doing this right, at some point, a data engineer, a product manager, a software developer, a data analyst, those are going to be the folks that are responsible for really, driving home those actionable insights. And, I think one of the challenges too is those folks aren't as familiar with picking up and delivering freight and working within the business. So again, you have to be as specific as possible about what to do with all of those kind of conditional if statements in order to get the reporting as accurate as possible, so that the teams will adopt it and use it, and it drives good outcomes.
Yeah, and that's really where having like that product and tech subject matter expertise alongside really a solid freight operator. To your point around like what can carriers provide digitally, if I'm building as a product person working alongside tech, if I'm building tracking and tracing mechanisms and process and automation because I'm using FedEx Freight in the LTL environment, well, that's going to look very differently if I'm using a truckload carrier who has 10 trucks or less, which is 80% of the truckload market. They're not having the technology and the tools that someone like a FedEx Freight is having. And so having those transportation folks work in deep collaboration with product and tech in every one of these steps to make sure the tools are operating as they should are really important.
Totally. Sure. I think those jerks at Amazon have made it so easy as they ship our suitcase from point to point and show us exactly where it is.
Right.
I get it. It is difficult to understand why Amazon, FedEx in the parcel space, UPS in the parcel space can have such like granular information about where stuff is. And then if I have one tube of toothpaste, I know exactly where it is. If I have 42,000 pounds of toothpaste, somehow no one can tell me where it is. Like I empathize how that is a bit frustrating. Yeah.
No, and even when you think about, we were working with a client through a lead time strategy, and the client is giving us 4 days of lead time when they drop an order versus when it has to pick up. But the outside warehouse, again, this speaks to auditing and strategy and process around your manual procedures, because we're digitally getting 4 days of lead time to get an order picked up. However, the outside warehouse will not release that order in their WMS system until noontime the day before of pickup. So that took that 4 days of lead time down to 4 hours. Well, what does that impact? Service and price, right?
Supplier base too, right? Like the type of company that those two situations work for different types of companies.
Exactly. Yep.
You limit the supplier base.
Yep. So let's just say you're a shipper and you haven't started down this path at all. I think, like you said, based on like 30 years of looking at this and then 8 years in the managed transportation space, we've seen a lot. Could you just step through and like describe like how companies have evolved and, basically, let's say they started with nothing, what that looks like. And then what we typically see is we're going through these order management process cycles with Prospect.
Yeah, totally. I think, for folks that are interested in doing this, whether it's on their own or with a series of partners, because I doubt many folks are just going to go build a TMS, right? So you're going to need partners to kind of figure out some of these solutions. I think a lot of folks will start with nothing, right? So they'll start with kind of no TMS. I think in this world, what we see a lot of is maybe a shared Excel document operating as a TMS. I think that's probably one of the more that's probably one of the better solutions. Like the baseline solution is there's just kind of nothing, right? So it's heavily reliant on, where's my freight emails, where's my freight phone calls. There's no integration, there's really no tracking. All data goes all data. If you think about kind of that circle of processes, like all data goes to die at each one of those processes. So there's nothing, there's not a lot going on. And I think one of the things that we see and have seen, both as consultants and again, more recently in the managed world is like, if a company will agree to give you information, they want to, they're trying to do the right thing, right? They want to do something better. I need help. I want to do something better. Well, yes, it's, can you help me? And okay, can we, again, trying to ground ourselves in the reality, trying to ground ourselves in the data. Can you share some information with us? And I think one of the challenges that we've seen is it takes about 8 weeks on average from the time that they say that yes, we need help, we want information, to here's the information that'll help, help you help us. And I think it's not just us that's facing those challenges. It's really everyone, kind of everywhere. So you're pretty reliant on, again, just to kind of summarize, there's not a lot of technology. There's not a lot of tracking process. Data is kind of dying in these silos. There's not a great opportunity for continuous improvement, and change takes a really long time, which costs companies money.
Yep. You got folks living in Excel across all departments. You've got transportation teams, emailing, email to find out where freight is, to get back to sales and customer service. It's a lot of productivity hours, and then not a lot of actionable data on the back end, for sure.
Yeah, I think, kind of the next evolution that we've seen over the years has been this kind of like free TMS concept. And so typically, there's kind of two main commercial models for that. So typically you're looking at, the TMS will have some kind of relationship on the back end with, with suppliers, whether those are 3PLs, truckload companies, less than truckload companies, whatever it is. And they'll kind of commercialize that there. Or it'll be, kind of free for one user, $10.99 a month for 2 users, and kind of like a software model as you grow and scale with that. I think the pros of this is it's a good step in the right direction. So you do have some ability to capture information, right? I think the cons is typically the functionality is pretty restricted. I think what we've seen with these types of softwares is it's good at one thing. So potentially it's a modal TMS. So it's an LTL TMS more or less, but they also do a little bit of truckload, and maybe they have a parcel module, but there's not really a ton of capabilities or functionality. I think a big one is just like no to low customization. The goal of these products is to kind of distribute them widely, make a little bit of money on a lot of different people, and not touch them to the best of their ability. So I think, again, every business in our experience is unique, right? They have different, whether it's at a facility level, at a corporate level, at whatever level you're trying to solve for, their customers, which we talked about earlier, their suppliers, their modal decisions, the order requirements that they have. There's a lot of things that need to be kind of adjusted and customized and tinkered with, and you're really not finding like a lot of solutions in this space.
Yeah.
I think the last point is that the reporting again is pretty limited. So if you think about how do I apply continuous improvement, or how do I get more visibility, or how do I price my products more effectively so I can make more money or sell more goods, you're not really getting that rich quality data. I think another thing that we've seen over the years, especially at places that have multiple facilities, is when something's no cost or extremely low cost, and the budget impact isn't big, people tend to make these decisions almost in a silo. So one thing that we've seen before is, give you an example. It's company has 3 different facilities. Company A uses TMS A, company B uses TMS B, and company C uses TMS C. And so the same organization that has 3 different facilities, not companies, is using 3 different systems. So the ability to kind of aggregate that information to report at a corporate level, to bring consistency to it, it's all very limited.
No, it really is. And then what they're doing is they're putting manual hours on getting data into Excel out of these different systems and then trying to build that actionable data. And I think when we see people sit in kind of this free TMS, it leads them to the next one, which is, well, this free TMS doesn't do what we need it to. Let's go buy a real TMS and let's see if we can make that customization happen, right?
Totally. And again, I this is a good sign. This is a big step in the right direction for an organization. I think, again, to kind of go back to what we were saying earlier, this is going to be very expensive. This is very expensive to do. It's very time consuming to do. So you really need to think about what are the outcomes that you're looking for? What is the process that you have? What do you want the system to do? Because you're getting a lot of functionality. So I would say in this, sort of how to think about the non-integrated TMS is, this is a system that isn't connected with warehouse systems, isn't connected with potentially financial accounting systems, right? So this is a tool that is bought to really support operations and transportation and logistics teams. So you have a lot of functionality. It's highly customizable, right? I think we've heard stories of these implementations going on 18 months because they're always kind of tinkering and changing things. And again, let's think about that 3 facility model. Is facility A, B, and C previously were using 3 different TMSs, and now they have 3 different processes. And so it's really you kind of have 2 options. You can either do really long, expensive, integrations and implementations, or you can, have a really, really strong change management practice. So, I think it's a big time step in the right direction. But again, some of the things that some of the problems here is a lot of that, the finance and order information it lives in those financial accounting and ERP systems. And so the ability to drag that through and add detail and context and color to your orders and to your, the drivers of your financial success is going to be limited. Again, I think a big thing too that we've seen is, over the last 3, 4, 5 years, just the pace of change of technology in the space. There's been a lot of venture, supply chain became very hot in 2020 with COVID and the response to COVID. There was a lot of venture money that poured in. There's been a lot of cool technology that's been built, but I think observationally, one of the problems is the technology typically what you see is the technology solves one part or one process of that transportation fulfillment cycle, right? You don't really have a lot of technology providers just because it is so hard, trying to take on the whole thing. They kind of carve it up and they solve bits and pieces of that. And so, while it is good technology and useful technology, I think keeping up with the pace of change of that technology and also the continuous need to be integrating and improving your own technology so that you can drive the outcomes that you want. It's hard, right? I think if you think about, manufacturers, retailers, distributors that are trying to solve for these problems, this isn't their core business. Their core business is, inbound and selling things, or their core business is making things. And so, just to have, and that becomes a resourcing problem too, right? That's a big time resourcing problem is, if our core business is making widgets and making them better and selling them to a customer base, like if the resources, the technology resources could go towards like selling more widgets or improving TMS, like it's going to go to the widgets every single time. So just
100%.
that pace of change and keeping up with the pace of change, and almost the continuous improvement within your own technology is hard. It's hard and it's really expensive.
Yep, I agree.
So I think the next step is now we're integrated, right? So we have our ERP. Potentially we have some financial accounting software. Potentially there's some visibility platforms, some contract management platforms, maybe some optimization. I mean, this is great. I think in our experience, and again, as consultants, we were talking to everyone from local bakeries to some of the biggest Fortune 500s in the world. I would venture to say, and this don't exactly quote me because this is more based on our experience. But if you're in level 4 or level 5, you're kind of in the top 95, 98% of we're in gold star status at this point.
And even in gold star status, we've seen there's still a lot of problems. This is hard, right? In this integrated model, you may be getting this digital order that you can map into your TMS, but TMSs, they like loads. They don't like orders. They're not necessarily great at optimization, right? So then there's all these other, forget back-end digital connections with carriers, but there's some front-end solutioning that needs to be solved for with people, process, technology before you even enter into your TMS, regardless of what TMS it is, whether you built one, whether you've purchased a subscription for one. It's not a place to house orders. It's a place to operate loads.
Yeah. And so I think the big gap here is really using the integrated TMS as a reporting platform. Mm-hmm. It's great for kind of executing that core functionality. Mm-hmm. You've got a lot of good stuff going on, but I think what we've seen is a lot of companies will try to then pull that information directly out of the TMS, and it's really hard to do. So this is, I think this is kind of like end state. This is the Fortune 100, Fortune 500 type of experience, right? This is really. So I think the big difference between 4 and 5 again is going to be your database, database strategy and your reporting capabilities. So. In stage 5, you're really tightly integrated with your ERP, with your financial systems, potentially with your warehousing systems. You have, captured and categorized and built audits around, all of those core processes that we kind of talked about earlier. The precision in the data allows you to really provide some continuous improvement, right? So I think one thing that we've seen is that companies in this state aren't just executing freight; they're using freight and logistics as a weapon for their company, as a competitive differentiation, right? Mm-hmm. All of these reports are customizable because again, they're the reporting structure is being driven not from the TMS, but from cloud services, data engineers, data analysts, software developers, right? So I think the customization around what you're looking to do is miles and miles and miles away from kind of that reporting out of the TMS.
Yeah, and I think if we think about it, one of the questions is, across departments, what do you commonly see? And so I think there's a version of this, like what we're calling 5 steps of visibility, where we see, no TMS working in Excel, where we see maybe you have a TMS, it's a free one, or you're using a standalone TMS solution. there's no real ability to get good data out of it and good actionable data. And so I think when you look at like a true integrated with BI analytics and you think about that across your departments, imagine where finance teams are now armed with live accruals. They have the ability to build a forecast and to manage a budget, GL coding, all of that. But also imagine a place where in a live environment, once that order is in and booked, you from a corporate treasury, so just maybe you're billing your customers for freight and maybe it's not what you're paying for freight. Managing all of that financial part of it is really where you can get those teams. We see a lot of FP&A, a lot of controllers, a lot of APAR folks living in exportable data from an ERP, a WMS, a TMS, and they're managing all of that in Excel, and then they're trying to reconsume it into their native accounting systems. And so, again, if you're doing it best in class, you now have the ability with TMS, data warehouse, BI analytics to customize that solution so it's automated. And if you think about sales and customer service teams, really giving them that data visibility to where those orders are. Oh, wait, it shipped short. Why? We've seen customer service teams spending 35 to 45% of their time chasing transportation issues. We've seen customer service and sales team lose sales because they don't know that the order was cut and shipped short until 7 days later when it delivers. Imagine knowing that at book, and you now have 7 days to replenish or resell or reservice that customer. You're now gaining additional sales. Shipping sites spending 19 to 22 steps on average, getting orders out of an ERP, a bill of lading generated, and freight tendered to a carrier. And then, usually the transportation and supply chain teams are left with these tasks. And even if they understand what the strategy should be, what the process looks like, their hands are tied behind their backs because they don't have the tools. And so you often see a lot of really smart, strategic thinking people in these departments who are spending hours manipulating data. And so as you think about those productivity savings that you're going to grab really working in a best class environment, I think, again, high level across departments, that's commonly what we see. And by doing it with a best practice, you're going to pull all of those hours, and the folks that you're hiring to do really smart strategic work and grow your business and run and operate your business are going to actually have the bandwidth to do some of that work.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think, it's a challenge that we face and everyone on the call faces is like hiring is so difficult today. It's tough. It's tough to find people. That ability to make the work more strategic, to make it more impactful, that's what keeps folks in the role and with your company, and then you can kind of compound all of the value that they're learning and driving and over a long period of time. So it's really important.
Yeah, you don't want to hire good people to do bad work.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if they're doing manual work. I think what we see a lot of times is there's a lot of effort, there's a lot of time spent on these things, and then the results are generally inaccurate. So it's like it's a lot of investment for kind of suboptimal results.
Yeah, and I think it's important as you're looking. So I think, again, you're looking at your order management cycle transportation process. And if you're still with us, this is that deep dive work that we've done as consultants for over 30 years that we live in our managed transportation space. Like, it's really important. If this is of interest to you and visibility is something that your company is talking about for 2024, please reach out to us, because at no cost to you we can step through this order management transportation process, and we can show you kind of where you are across departments, how you're managing sales orders, purchase orders, transfer orders across all these departments, and identify if there are any gaps, and identify really where strategically working towards like a best practice around financial and operational order visibility might make some sense. And so please reach out to us. We're happy, again, to step through that with you. Because again, I think I go back to Steve, you said it more than once, this is hard. And if you are in the manufacturing game and the retail game and the distributor game, there oftentimes this isn't where you want to be resourcing your people or your money. You're resourcing to build and grow your business. And this is where we as managed transportation providers have resourced, and we can help you look through the discovery of that order management process. Let me just look and see if there's any more questions, and if not, we can wrap. Just a kind of a standard question is, what about the transportation process makes it challenging to achieve enterprise-wide visibility? I can go ahead.
I think it's the same. It's kind of the theme of there's a lot of different orders. There's a lot of different shipments. There's a lot of different things that have to go right. And as we all know, there's a lot of different things that definitely go wrong all day. And so having, stringing that together over, 5, 10, 20, maybe 100,000 orders, and then having, having all of those touch points documented, and then having, again, like it's not just having a free TMS or something that's pretty easy to use. It's really investing the time and energy into something, with a lot of different people involved, right? Anytime that you have a big team involvement, it becomes harder. So I think it's just all the different parties and complexity at play, and investment that needs to be made, and training that needs to be also continuously improved, so that you can get the outcomes that you want in order to make the decisions that you need for your business to grow and be profitable, and be the type of company that you want to be.
Yep. Yeah, makes sense. Well, thanks for the time today. And again, reach out if you have any questions. We are going to post this webinar on LinkedIn Live. So you can grab the materials there if you need it. Any questions for Steve and I, feel free to reach out to us on our LinkedIn pages. You can also email us. It's saborn@freightplus.io and jclifford@freightplus.io.